Welcome everyone to the Inflation Reduction Act and Electric Vehicles webinar. We will get started just in about 30 seconds here. We'll let folks join before we kick it off, but thank you everyone for being here. Feel free to drop into the chat your name and where you're joining us from. We'd love to hear from you. Awesome. I see some folks dropping into the chat. Looks like we have a great cross section of folks from all over the United States. Again, welcome everyone to our event tonight. We're going to get started here, and I'm sure folks will continue trickling in. But welcome to our Inflation Reduction Act and Electric Vehicles event today. We're going to have a couple slides just to kick us off, and then we'll turn it over to our guest speaker today. So our runner show today, we'll do some quick logistics, do some quick introductions, talk about who Solar United Neighbors is, who you have on the call with you tonight, and then we will turn it over to our presentation and we'll have a good chunk of time afterwards for Q&A. So with that, if you do have questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A function of the Zoom webinar. So if you look at your bottom panel, you have the option for Q&A and chat. Let's keep the chat for chatting with other folks, connecting about where you're joining us from. If you have thoughts or comments, but questions into the Q&A portion, that just helps us to keep them organized, as we have a lot of folks with us tonight. That will really help us out. And everyone will get a recording afterwards of the presentation, and the slides will be coming as well. For those of you who aren't familiar, we're Solar United Neighbors. We're a nonprofit that helps folks to go solar, join together, and fight for your energy rights. We'll drop our link to our website in the chat. And my name is Alexis Miller. I'm the Director of Community Impact at Solar United Neighbors. I'm joined by Annie Wolf, my colleague who is the VP of Community Impact. And we're really excited to be joined by Will Dreyer, who's the policy manager at the Electrification Coalition. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Will. Thank you guys for being here, and thanks, Will, for joining us.
Absolutely. Great to see you all. Let me just make sure I get my share screen. Can you see that? Is it working?
Not yet.
Okay, sorry. Man, we just practiced this.
Yeah, we just practiced that. There's always something, you know. There you go. It's loading. Cool. Yes.
All right. Great. Great. Well, yeah. Thanks for the introduction. And it's great to be talking with you all today. I'm Will Dreyer, policy manager with the Electrification Coalition. I'll just do a quick background on our organization. The Electrification Coalition, we're a nonpartisan nonprofit organization, and we're dedicated to rapidly electrifying our transportation sector. We come at it from a slightly different angle than I think most folks do. We're focused on electrifying the transportation sector in order to combat our national and economic security concerns that arise from oil's monopoly on our transportation sector. And the cartel that controls oil on a global scale is made up of actors that don't hold our beliefs or our interests at heart. We see that by transitioning our transportation sector to a diverse array of domestic electrons, we can insulate ourselves from global oil shocks and the geopolitical events that are so disruptive, much like Russia's recent invasion of Ukraine. And as our I guess one of our president CEOs of our sister organization, SAFE, likes to say, we want to make sure we're not jumping out of the Saudi frying pan and into the Beijing fire. We also want to make sure that at home we're seeing a build out of increasing competitiveness of our manufacturing sectors, supply chains, and the like, and make sure that we continue that competitive manufacturing excellence that the United States has been known for so long. A brief overview, my slide will advance, of our work. Electrification Coalition, we're kind of split into two pillars, and like I mentioned, our sister organization, SAFE, We spun out of that back in 2008 or 2009 with the first national electric vehicle roadmap. Was a great document. You know, I still talk to people today who mention that as kind of the cornerstone of EV policy back then, or got them into the space, and you know, hope we can continue to do that work justice as we move forward. But since that kind of moment in time, back in the early or late 2000s, early 2010, started a program and implementation team that works very closely with local agencies, fleets, cities to help them electrify. We had one of the first incubator programs in Fort Collins, Colorado, getting them to move forward with electrification, and just kind of expand it out from there. Our other kind of pillar is the policy team, which I'm a part of. We're a little bit newer, going into our third year next year. We focus both on the federal, but state level as well. We work pretty closely with about 10 or so states, and you know, we continue to expand as the market expands. I think on our next slide, just kind of a quick snapshot of where we work. EC is a remote organization, so we have folks on the ground in most of the states that we work in, as well as kind of our headquartered in DC, and working with a lot of cities. Just a quick slide. We do have a number of reports and resources that I wanted to throw up there for you, and I think there'll be some links in the chat as we go along. But you can also scan this QR code, which is really great, take you to explore some of our resources. I'll highlight just a few here. I think one of our most recent reports is the vehicle to grid technology and policy recommendation report. We're seeing a lot of traction in the V2G space, and we have another report coming similarly on V2G and how that can be used for resilience purposes, coming out in January. We've also got a fleet electrification roadmap, and other policies focused on the fleet and commercial sector. I'll also point out our Achieve model policy toolkit. This is a joint report that we work on with Sierra Club, Plug in America, and Forth. I think the 4.0 version is up on our website. I'll just let you all know that the 5.0 is in development and also should be out in January with some updates. So keep your eye out for that. EC also works very closely with our business council. It's a group of 30 plus businesses in the EV space. We collaborate with them, and they share their expertise with us on the industry and you know, what policies are best for moving the industry forward. Yeah, they've been great. Quick photo slide, because the next are going to be really text heavy, so enjoy what you can. If you take a close look, you can see me at a EV charging ribbon cutting event in the pouring rain. Was a lot of fun. As many of you know, the Inflation Reduction Act was signed into law back in August. This was $370 billion in total for climate and energy investments. I mostly want to share this slide with the link here, and I think that'll be dropped in the chat too. This is a link that a webinar that we did with our sister organization, SAFE, and it's a deep dive on the mineral and strategic industrial material provisions and other supply chain issues. So if you're interested in those, I would highly recommend you check that out as time permits. You'll also find on that website our a number of fact sheets and frequently asked questions that are informative. But so there are 5 major buckets that I'll talk through today on the components of the IRA that I think address key policy priorities for the Electrification Coalition and EVs in general. First up is the purchase incentives. I think what has grabbed a lot of headlines, a lot of interest in is the tax credits. 30D, 45W, 25E, and I'll dive into those in a couple slides. But there are a number of different programs that I think can all help with EV procurement and EV charging procurement. I will mention briefly that left off this list is another program for ports. I think there's about $3 billion for ports, which includes inland ports. I think that's super interesting, great opportunity for using those funds to reduce emissions there. Our other sister organization, the Coalition for Reimagined Mobility, works very closely in the logistics space and with ports. And if anyone's interested in those aspects, I'm happy to make the connection to folks over there as well. So let's dive into the tax credits. There's obviously a lot of details here, but I think it's important to note, what has changed from the tax credit to now with IRA passing. I think the first reaction a lot of folks had was that this tax credit is very difficult to qualify for, kills the EV tax credit, and was not good for EVs. But I think that there are so many provisions as a part of IRA, but also as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law that are helping to build and guide the supply chain in the U.S., build up all that domestic manufacturing, and transform our economy to a minerals to markets based economy that we're really going to see that this will take off, and still plenty of EVs will be able to take advantage of the tax credit in the coming years. But there are also a number of other different components here. There's now an MSRP cap. There are income qualifying caps. There's a final assembly in North America requirement. On the positive side too, though, I think the transferability of the tax credit is hugely important. Something to note, for those who don't have the tax equity in order to take advantage of the tax credit, this opens up the door for a lot of people to take advantage of it. I think, as we go on, I think it's in 2024 is when, the tax credit can also be transferred to the dealerships if you decide to buy from a dealership, or you're buying directly from an OEM like a Tesla, Rivian, Lucid. You can transfer it to them, and then it becomes an effective rebate at the point of purchase, which I think is also really great for folks that don't have to wait for tax season to realize that. Also great to see the long-term extension, this through 2032, 10 years gives a lot of runway and a lot of predictability, and consumers being able to anticipate how much money they're going to be spending, right? What else? And then the excluding foreign entities of concern. This is just that battery components and minerals can't come from these foreign entities of concern in 2024 and in 2025. This will be something we continue to see getting guidance out of the IRS. But ultimately, something that helps promote domestic supply chains here in the United States, and our free trade agreement allies. But all of that is to say, part of the IRS's guidance too will be to see if this is something that's feasible, given our free trade agreements and the workability around that. So there's still a lot I think we'll see in the coming, weeks now, with their initial guidance coming out supposedly by the end of the year. And then final guidance within 18 months of that, but something to keep our eyes on. This is just a quick slide. AFDC, the Alternative Fuel Data Center website that's part of the Department of Energy, has a resource online where you can see the EVs that do currently qualify for the tax credit. I don't think this includes the mineral provisions right now, but just includes the final assembly in North America provision. So you can go on and see if the model you're expecting to buy kind of falls into that. And then you can also do it by vehicle identification number, which is important for some vehicle models where they might be assembled in multiple places. 25E, this is also a tax credit I'm really excited about. I think it's great news for the used EV industry. Like you can see, this is up to $4,000 or 30% of the sale price. And there is like a sale cap. $25,000 is the max price for the vehicle. And this credit can only be applied to a vehicle once. So like the first owner to the second owner, you can't just keep flipping the vehicle for the tax credit. And there are also income caps. So similar to 30D. I think we would like to see a similar credit in the medium heavy duty space for used medium heavy duty EVs, but that was not part of the IRA. So hopefully in the next session is something we can work towards, part of the next session of Congress. Important to note that also, unlike the 30D tax credit, there are no assembly or mineral provisions here for the EV. So any used EV can qualify under this tax credit. The other one, 45W, is for the commercial vehicle space. There's also what I think is really important is the direct pay element, which allows for tax exempt entities to take advantage of the credit. So this is your, local city governments, nonprofits that don't have that tax exposure can be in the form of a direct payment. Also, what I think is really crucial for 45W is there is no final assembly requirements, no battery component requirements. So, any medium heavy duty vehicle qualifies for the incentive. As you can see here, it's kind of a split at the 14,000 pound level on the max incentive. I do think, something that we submitted in our comments to the IRS, and hopefully we'll get additional guidance on, is you can see as part of the requirement is that the excess of the purchase price of such vehicle over the price of a comparable vehicle, understanding what comparable means and, how that the IRS guidance can make that easy for businesses, consumers, fleets to understand what a comparable vehicle means, and maybe not have them have to do the legwork to identify that. I think weight can be an issue, right? Because EVs are often heavier than internal combustion engine vehicles. Vehicle footprint might not be a great identifier either. So if the IRS, I think in our comments we mentioned to the IRS, if they could add a definition or even provide some kind of database of this vehicle as the comparable version of this EV, and really take the legwork out, I think that would be hugely beneficial, and remove that onus on the fleets. Let's see. Oops. Here's some other, other purchase. Oh, too far. Other purchase incentives and programs. I won't read them for you all, and I think I'll send the slides around after so you can do deeper dives yourselves. But I think it's important to note that for all of these, a big focus of the Biden administration is their Justice 40 goals. And so a lot, if not all of these, have certain carve-outs for low income and or disadvantaged communities. And also of note is that a lot of these programs go beyond just the EV, just the vehicle. So whether that's for infrastructure, technical assistance, workforce development, there may even be some wiggle room on grid upgrades or circuitry upgrades, depending on IRS guidance. But I think for all this funding, you look at you look at the $5 billion for the NEVI corridor funds out of the bipartisan infrastructure law, another $2.5 billion from the competitive grants from the similar program that we're still waiting for guidance from. But $7.5 billion there. Then you've got another $1 billion for clean heavy duty program, $3 billion on the equity grant program, another almost $3 billion for the climate justice block grants, $60 million from DERA, and then $27 billion in the greenhouse gas reduction program. It's like this is a lot of money that's being invested into the EV space, and might be a little biased. There are a lot of technologies that are qualifying for many of these programs, but I think as all to show that there's a big push in a lot of these cleaner technologies, and obviously a good chunk of that will flow into the EV space. Another quick little photo break for you. Let's see. So the infrastructure availability incentives. I think the big one to note is Section 30C, excuse me, and then a handful of the projects that were on the previous slide. The 30C tax credit, also a big win, but it is a bit complicated. Before the IRA, this was a tax credit that was continuously retroactively extended every year. So every year was just renewed for another year, which didn't give a lot of certainty to folks who were investing in EV infrastructure. I think this 10-year long-term extension adds a lot of certainty and provides a lot of confidence in what business owners will be investing into the space. As you can see, there's two different kind of components here: is the commercial use and the residential use. Commercial use properties, this is a 6% tax credit, but if you meet certain wage and apprenticeship requirements, this can go up to 30% tax credit. The individual tax credit, this remains unchanged with at 30%, but a cap at $1,000. Important to note, I guess, bidirectional charging infrastructure is eligible. It always has been eligible, but they've made that a lot more clear in this, and something I think we'll continue to see a lot of attention around. There's also a lot of requirements about where the qualifying properties are placed. Urban areas are out, but low income and rural areas are in. There's also a direct pay component and transferability available for tax exempt entities without tax equity. Let's see, there was some other modifications. I think some of the language that is now used is around a single unit of property is eligible. Well, what does this mean? It used to be one project. So for example, one gas station could install 5 chargers, and that was their one eligible project. Now it seems that each charger would be eligible, but still looking for guidance from the IRS on exactly what would encompass in that project. So is it just the charger? Is there other construction costs, lighting, usability improvements, etc., that can be included as part of the tax credit costs? There's also some confusion around the census tracts, and I'm definitely not an expert here, but I do know that there are folks who have commented on this and making sure that rural communities that are close by urban communities and how the census tract designation works versus census blocks. So trying to hone in on definitions there and make it so that certain rural communities aren't left out because of their proximity to rural ones or urban ones, excuse me. Here are the manufacturing and supply chain incentives. A lot of manufacturers and mineral companies are excited about this, particularly 45X. There's what I think they're really excited about. There's no sunset on minerals production under 45X tax credit. And I think in general it's important to see that all of these manufacturing and supply chain incentives are in IRA to incentivize onshoring these supply chains and building out the domestic capacity here, kind of like I was mentioning earlier. Funding for the federal fleet, excuse me. Not a lot of applicability probably here for you all, but it has been continuing a priority for us. And most communities have post offices, and that's usually a high profile kind of application, and seeing them electrify their fleets, I think would be really important and go a long way in visibility and acceptance of EVs for all kinds of communities. I won't spend too much time here, but the grid resiliency and grid security, almost $10 billion here, which is essentially going towards rural co-ops to strengthen their grid. There's other funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law in general on smart grid investment grants that are under the DOE. And then, of course, none of this can really happen without transmission. So making sure that there's incentives to increase transmission capacity there. So what is the EC working on? We kind of split it into three kind of components: fix, defend, and implement. For the next year, we'll look at how what shortfalls are there in the bills that have been passed, and how can we repair those and make sure that they're implemented smart and effectively. Defending, making sure that we don't lose on all of these great wins for the EV space and climate investments in general. And then implementing, making sure that on the ground these funds are being used properly and going towards the goals that they're intended to. And then just want to kind of call out, what the IRS is working on. They've been very clear on what their principles for applying guidance has been and will continue to be. Robust public engagement, providing clarity and certainty, and sound stewardship for the guardrails of these funds. I'll just point out that the Clean Heavy Duty program and the ports programs, they are accepting feedback on those programs right now through January 18th. You might have seen a few other kind of components throughout my slide deck. We've been using the slide deck a lot and been calling out when there's been opportunities for feedback, but this is those are the only ones that are still open that I'm aware of at this time. And that's about it. You got my contact information there, and we can dive into some questions.
Thanks. We'll really appreciate it, and we'll drop in your contact information for folks and share that with people, as I'm sure there are more questions to come. There are a few short ones with folks who had just questions about some abbreviations shared that I figured to jump into first. Blair asked what's HD, and then Jan had asked who are the FECs.
HD means heavy duty. And then FEC, which is from the 30D tax credit, those are foreign entities of concern. Making sure that the mineral components don't come from foreign entities of concern. I don't think that there's a formal list of those yet, but China would probably be foreign entity of concern number one as far as the national security is concerned for that. But I think IRS guidance will continue to elaborate on that and who the eligible free trade agreement allies would be that would qualify as not FECs.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying. Bob asked if you happen to know if there's any news on efforts to make three-wheeled vehicles eligible for the EV incentive.
That's a really good question. I've had several conversations with Aptera, and I don't know where the credit lands for them. I think, I honestly don't know. I would point you in their direction. Happy to make that connection or see if I can dig up something from them and pass it back, but don't know where they are as far as qualifying.
Gotcha. They're working on it. Stephen asked if we're encouraging ourselves and others to purchase EVs, should we patronize the EC business partners as a first choice? Do you guys have folks you recommend?
Wow, that's I feel like I should charge ECBC kind of like a little finder's fee or something. I think all of our ECBC partners are great partners and have a lot of great products, and would encourage you to seek them out and do your own research. No endorsement of their products or products of others in general, but happy to connect you with folks if you're interested in chatting with any of them.
Thanks. Well, and do you know anything about the tax credits being able to be used in Puerto Rico or anything around that?
I don't. That seems like more of a tax expert question on how Puerto Rico and other taxes work. I would think that they do, but I don't know.
Yeah, no problem. Feel free to also drop in, Annie will probably drop in our help desk is helpdesk@soilunitedneighbors.org, and we have a Puerto Rico program there that we can connect folks to. Brian asked if you could chat a little bit more about those who don't have a tax liability, for example, like retired folks, how they could benefit from the tax credit.
Yeah, so I think in 2023, it should still come back as a direct payment to the taxpayer in the form of a tax refund. So they would get, if they bought the EV in 2023, they would get their tax refund the following year. In 2024, though, when they go to buy, if they were to go buy an EV, the tax credit will be transferable to the dealership. So if they show up, they get a quote from the dealer that the vehicle's, $50,000. Right then and there, they can apply they can transfer the tax credit to the dealership, and then that becomes 42.5. So they can just hand it off in that way. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. Richard said Will had mentioned $3 billion available in funds under the IRA for an inland EV charging port. And he asked, what section are you referring to with that?
So there is a ports program within the IRA. I don't know if it's specifically. I mean, I know that inland ports should qualify for that. Other than that, I don't have too much information, and would have to redirect you to the Coalition for Reimagined Mobility, our sister organization, on some of the port stuff.
Great. And do these apply to hybrids or only to all electric vehicles?
They should apply to plug-in hybrids as well. Let me just look at my notes really quick. But not like a traditional hybrid, but it would have to be a plug-in hybrid. Yeah, it should be on our website fact sheet as well. I think there's probably a battery capacity requirement for the plug-in hybrid.
I can drop that into the chat for folks to look through. The next question I'm actually well, you can feel free to answer, Will, if you have experience with this, but I have the feeling there are others in the audience who have experience with this as well, that they can drop into the chat their thoughts. Marty asked, what happens if you're driving your electric vehicle and your battery runs out on the road? Can AAA provide an emergency charge, or do you walk home?
Probably depends on your local AAA. I don't know how fitted all of AAA is with where they are, but there are mobile chargers that are continuing to see more prevalence on the market. But the alternative would be you might get a tow in the meantime to the closest charger. But I guess I wouldn't speculate, but yeah, that's how I'll leave it there. I guess I would reach out to your local AAA for more information.
It looks like others, have had experience as well, that they have had to get towed. Haven't we all had a bad car experience, EV or not,
Mm-hmm.
William asks, are the income limits a cliff limit, or is there an eligibility phase out schedule for those?
If I understand the question right, I think if you once you are over 150,000 for the new EV tax credit, I don't think you qualify. So if you're like at 160, I don't think it's like a lower tax credit. It's all or nothing.
And Mark asked, he's building a carport on his property that he wants to electrify, perhaps with solar panels and including charging for EVs. Would that qualify for a tax credit, something like that?
I think you could qualify, the residential EV tax credit. I'm not as familiar on the solar stuff, so would look to someone else. I think there'll be more guidance too on whether or not how much double dipping, I guess, is allowed on the federal programs, and if you could use if you could use like a solar incentive tax credit incentive on top of like an EV tax credit incentive. I know that they typically don't allow for don't typically allow for like you to dip into a federal funding bucket and a tax credit. That's kind of a double dip there. Yeah, I'm not sure if how that would overlap between like solar and EV stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. And again, we work a lot on the solar side and do have folks that are trying to get all the details on the solar side as well. So I think it was William who asked that. You can feel free to reach out to our help desk too for some more information about that, and we can help you with going solar as well. Carrie asked about what are the tax credit rules for the remainder of 2022.
So they are I believe they're the same as like the only component that I think has changed is that I think that they're mostly the same through what they've been. I'm trying to look at my notes. I know our fact sheet should describe it in detail. Yeah, because I know that the 200,000 vehicle cap is lifted starting in 2023, but I don't know if it was as soon as IRA passed that was lifted and other vehicles are now qualify. Yeah, I don't think so. So I think, so I think the only component now is that you still need final assembly in North America. So that AFDC link that I dropped will show you what vehicles qualify. And in that, I think are the notes that like this vehicle qualifies, but they have already hit the 200,000 manufacturer cap, and then it wouldn't be eligible until 2023.
And along those lines, as I'm sure you would guess, there's a lot of questions like, how do I know for sure I'm going to get it? Like, what is your best recommendation for folks to go about like purchasing a vehicle that they know will qualify for the incentive?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say again, like check out that website. I think part of it will have to be like you go to the dealership and you find what vehicle you want, and if it's on the maybe list, you'll have to get the exact vehicle identification number and do a check, because that's kind of part of the assembly provisions and the component requirements. Again, hoping to get IRS guidance by the end of the year, which should provide a lot of clarity to consumers on how to take advantage of it. I would hope in the next 2-3 weeks we'll have more information.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of like pieces around the IRA that we're all kind of waiting for some more details to get rolled out. So fingers crossed to get that soon.
Mm-hmm.
Susan said she ended up with two 2022 EVs and is looking to sell one. What is the deal with used EV sale incentives? Can only go to dealerships.
I'm not sure on how it will work as a personal seller for the tax credit. I think because it's linked to the vehicle identification number, as long as you're still the first buyer, that maybe you'll be able to that the buyer will be able to claim it from you. But yeah, that's another component that I think we're waiting on IRS guidance.
Gotcha. Thank you. It looks like Lisa is asking, sorry, I'm just trying to read through this so I can say it clearly. As far as jobs in manufacturing, either in battery storage or helping to assemble cars, are there programs for training in this, or is this a type of job you would get on the ground training? Do you know about anything about that?
I don't know too much. I know that there's a handful of manufacturers that work with local communities on workforce development. I don't know exactly what those programs look like, and I think it kind of varies from location to location. Sorry, I have to cough 1 second. Excuse me. But yeah, I mean, I think for some manufacturers or jobs, it might be on the job training. For others, you might need certain certifications. Obviously a lot of this is electrical work, or can be electrical work, and so I think there are certain requirements that need to be met to be like an electrician if you're installing EV charging infrastructure, or what the battery battery chemistries and that kind of thing. So I think it really depends on a case by case basis, but there are programs out there.
Thanks. Well, this is speaking to, I know you had talked about kind of the future of what you guys were looking at and what you were looking to continue to achieve with future legislation, as well as try to protect from this. And an anonymous attendee said they were somewhat disappointed that the previous tax credit is thrown out because hybrids and other vehicles that they wanted to purchase have been erased with the new requirements. Do you have any insight or thoughts on what the future of the tax credit would be, or trying to make it broader and incorporate more things, or what do you guys kind of envision with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the opportunities to make it more broad would be, what does a free trade agreement country look like, and where are we sourcing materials from, would open up or could open up some opportunities for, broader model availability. But I would say, after the passage of IRA, we've seen a bunch of announcements on manufacturers and battery plants, automobile assembly plants in the United States already. And so, there are a lot of companies that are champing at the bit to make sure that their consumers in the United States qualify for the tax credit. And so, I think industry is following the tax credit and hoping that they can bring that to the consumer. So I think it's like a both and kind of thing. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, and we have an anonymous question asking if we could provide some more details around any provisions for low to moderate income programming and incentives.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably send around the information in the slide deck and fact sheets. I think are the best way to kind of ID those. Like I mentioned, we're still waiting to see it. I know I keep harping on the IRS guidance, but it is kind of a key component of knowing what qualifies and what doesn't qualify, and all that. So can send some stuff around after the webinar.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm not sure if you're an EV expert, if you'll know this or not, so feel free to say no. But Sherry asked that she read it takes 10 years for an EV to be carbon neutral because of the inputs. Do you have any thoughts or insight on that?
I would vehemently disagree with that. I think the last study I saw was like, you could do it in under 2 years, and you look at the makeup of the grid throughout the United States, but you can look at your local grid makeup and the carbon intensity there. The payback is pretty quick on carbon emissions. There's a great debunking scientist on Twitter. I can't remember his name, but he does threads on this all the time, fully backed by all these studies. And it is pretty wild to think that how quickly we can see savings from an emission standpoint on EVs.
Great, glad you had insight on that. Brian said the manufacturer sales cap restrictions are being removed in 2023 for all manufacturers, for example, Tesla and GM, right?
Yep, that's correct. So they'll just have to meet the other components of the tax credit. So MSRP, income cap, the sourcing requirements, etc.
Right, and then Marcos asked, what about, are there any incentives to develop other technologies? They mentioned hydrogen. That is not a word I know how to pronounce, sorry.
Yeah, I think hydrogen, like fuel cell stuff, I think these are technologies that are also included in some of the other buckets that in general, I would say, EVs are better. But I think that there is some availability there for other technologies. Like we mentioned, plug-in hybrids, I think will continue to be viable as long as they meet certain minimums. And I don't really want to go down the hydrogen rabbit hole, but I think there are options for other technologies. But I think that the Biden administration, and we'll see with the IRS, kind of have certain priorities, and I think EVs will be the mainstay for a lot of those.
Great, thanks, Will. And it looks like that we have answered all the questions right now. If folks have any other questions, feel free to drop them in. We'll give a couple seconds for that to go in. Well, it's been 50 questions answered, so you're doing amazing.
Awesome.
Appreciate all the questions from everyone. I'll just give us 30 seconds or so for anyone to answer.
Great. Always great to have a really engaged group. It's always a bummer when you talk for 30 minutes and then nobody cares. So this is way better. Appreciate everyone's questions. And I know the chat's a lot going on in the chat. I've not been paying too close of attention, but appreciate all the engagement here.
Well, it looks like
we are getting
yeah.
just pop in. We are getting a ton of chatter about Toyota and Honda not being listed. So if you, I know, which, you know, I know we've talked about a couple of times why that might be, but if you have any insight, Will, I think that would be great to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to be like super blunt is like, well, that they should bring some manufacturing over the United States, right? But I think, you know, realistically, as they expand on the assembly plant thing or final assembly will probably continue to be a challenge, though I think that I think Nissan does have an assembly plant in the United States, or Toyota. I could be wrong, but I'd have to check. But, you know, if we, depending on the definition of a free trade agreement country, you know, having Japan, I'm not sure where Toyota and Honda source their minerals. I imagine that their battery components are assembled or made maybe in Japan. So, you know, it's a lot up in the air, and would hope that, you know, I was also really upset that Honda is not bringing the Honda E to the United States market, because that is such a cool looking tiny little car. But if I can't use a tax credit for it, I guess it doesn't matter. But, you know, I think we'll see what happens. Hopefully they can, I'm sure they're thinking about ways that they can bring their vehicles to our market in a way that can capture the tax credit, because they don't want to get behind in one of the world's largest auto markets, right? So.
Oh, it looks like we did get a couple questions that came back through, so we'll keep you going. Well, Lynn asks, does the tax credit apply if the vehicle is leased?
I believe so. I'm not really good on the leasing stuff, but I do believe there's a way to capture the tax credit incentive if you lease. Yeah, I know it's a little different too for the commercial space, because there's been a lot of discussion around if you're leasing, if you would rather, if you ought to do the 30C versus the 45. I'm sorry, the 30D or the 45W, yeah, 45W for leases. I do think for light duty, there's a way to capture the tax credit through a lease, but I'm just don't know enough to tell you how.
And could you give some more insight? I know you've talked about this a bit, but on who is going to be the person or the entity that's going to be verifying all the like manufacturing requirements for all the automakers?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who's going to be checking the boxes. I imagine the IRS will give us guidance on exactly how they plan on facilitating that kind of those checks, I guess. But like I mentioned, I would imagine that the AFDC or other resources will come up and say, like, if you can punch in your vehicle identification number for the vehicle you want to buy, and it'll spit out, oh yeah, your vehicle is, 40% of the battery is properly sourced for the credit, and you get $3,700 for it, and so on. So or 34, whatever it is, half the credit. I can't do math, but yeah, I don't know exactly like what entity will be the arbiter of that.
To be determined. There's a lot of details to get worked out. Well, it looks like that's all the ones in the Q&A. Annie, have you seen anything else in the chat that we should address?
That was the big one.
Awesome. One more just came through from Swan, is asking, are there incentives for taking non-EVs off the road and recycling them?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's like a cash for clunkers kind of thing happening. I know that's something that folks have talked about a lot. Just as far as recycling goes, I know that part of the sourcing provisions is they can be recycled battery materials recycled in North America. So if I think that would mean if you recycle a battery that's sourced from China or Japan or whatever, but it's recycled in North America and then repurposed as a lithium-ion battery for a new EV, that would qualify as for the part of the recycling components. But I don't know if there's any like I think in like the more heavy duty space, when you do a replacement, those usually are you can't like resell those are junked. But I don't know for light duty.
Great. And James asked, when are we going to see boots on the ground in regards to charging stations that have been mentioned in the IRA?
I'm not sure. I mean, the bipartisan infrastructure law and the like NEVI funds are getting dispersed every year. I imagine that those will be shovel in the ground within the next year. But I guess I don't have a definitive answer.
And then Elizabeth, I see, asked about, do we know when the IRS guidance will be coming out? And I think we're just hoping for as soon as possible, right?
Yeah, they're supposed to come out with guidance, initial guidance by the end of the year. And then they'll give, then they have 18 months to provide their final guidance. But it does seem like that this is a priority and they'll move quicker than that.
Do you have any insight into Tesla superchargers being used for other EVs and like using that across the board?
I know that there's some adapter that's coming out supposedly, but I haven't heard too much about it. I don't know kind of where we're at in the process of that. Generally, I wouldn't keep my fingers crossed for something like that, but it would be great if Tesla chargers were open for everybody.
Definitely. And do you have any thoughts or insights on non-lithium battery cars on the horizon or in the future?
Not any on non-lithium. I think there are plenty of companies working on solid state batteries that are still lithium, but they don't use a liquid for within the battery. So that would probably, I mean, the goal there is to decrease cost and increase capacity. We'll see if they can do that at a commercial scale. As far as like other like non-lithium applications, I've heard some like sulfur and like zinc air batteries, but those are not typically well suited for like a passenger vehicle. But who knows? It seems like they could come out with something next year or 5 years from now that would change the world, right? So
yeah, it's always changing quick. Well, it looks like we've got to all the questions that I'm seeing, and the chat has been very active, but I think we've got through most of those. I know I saw a request to get the chat shared with everyone, so we can do that when we share the slides and the recording with everyone. This is a good question actually to wrap up on. Is someone asked, what's a good website to keep up with the evolving changes on the EV parts of the IRA? Is that best to check your guys' website? Do you guys keep that up to date, or where should folks go to keep up to date on it?
Yeah, I would say it's a great plug for our website, electrificationcoalition.org. I'm sure we'll continue to spit out fact sheets and blog posts. We've got a newsletter you can sign up for, all that good stuff. You can check that out. Other great partners, I think Plug in America also does some great work, and they're very consumer oriented as well. So you can check them out. I think it's just pluginamerica.org.
Awesome. Yeah, we've worked with them as well, so we can include that link in the follow-up email as well. With that, I think we'll wrap us up. We've made it to over 60 questions, which is a lot. And well, super appreciate your time, and everyone, thank you so much for joining. Excited about these changes and for the future of what things will look like. Thank you so much, Will.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you all. Appreciate it.